Hello, friends, and welcome back to Mysterious Mondays. Tattooed Biker here with you, and tonight I've got 5 real viewer submitted encounters with Bigfoot or Sasquatch to share with you. Hope you're as excited as I am, so grab your gear and let's ride to Bigfoot country. Number 1. Dear Tattooed Biker, I had an encounter with what I think was a Bigfoot once. This happened back in the spring of 2018 when I was attending Western Kentucky University. My roommate and I are both old country boys who were living in the city. We are both big outdoorsmen and would rather be in the woods than anywhere else. I grew up in Boy Scouts, so I spent at least 1 weekend a month from ages 13 to 18 camping out in the woods somewhere. It's just where I feel the most at home. So living in the city drove me crazy until I found this beautiful park about 45 minutes outside of Bowling Green called Shanty Hollow Lake. It's a large 135-acre lake with many acres of land surrounding it. The area is also a major destination for college kids to hike to a beautiful waterfall. But that's the only trail in this massive park. My buddy and I like to get off the trail and see what we could find. We'd make new trails, climb cliffs, and just explore the area. One thing we noticed a lot was saplings, usually about 6 to 8 inches in diameter, snapped at the base and then twisted around another tree. Sometimes once, sometimes as many as 3 times. I always found this odd, and in recent history, I've read that these could be used as boundary markers. These were usually found off the beaten path, nowhere close to where people would hike. The night of the encounter, my buddy and I went out around 2 in the morning to try and view a meteor shower. We walked down the trail a ways to get away from the light reflecting off the lake to try and get a better view, but it was a full moon, so the night wasn't great for trying to view a meteor shower. As we were sitting there, just taking in the silence, we hear slaps on the water, and a flock of geese go absolutely nuts and take off flying. It scared the crap out of us because we weren't talking, just kind of sitting there, meditating. We think maybe it's a beaver or something and just laugh it off. But then we hear a huge splash. Something massive was thrown into the lake. And I mean massive, because it took about 5 seconds for the water to rain back down into the lake. That is what freaked us out the most. Even though it was very dark, we could see a vast and tall, upright form move out of the brush to our right, maybe 150 feet away. There was a grunting sound as well, though it soon faded away. The hair was standing up on the back of my neck, and we both simultaneously made the decision to get the hell out of there, and we booked it out just as fast as we could. I'll add that there was no one else there at all that night. And to my knowledge, nothing in the woods could throw a boulder that size. So I asked this question, was it a Bigfoot? And I would have to say that it was. Thanks. Signed, Philip. Number 2. Dear Sir, I have an encounter I'd like to share with you and your listeners. On Saturday, September 9th, 2023, my wife and I were driving north on US 24 at Rice Lake, Illinois. It was about 7:45 p.m. and dusk was settling in. Without warning, a large, maybe 7-foot tall, light-colored, hairy, upright creature crossed in front of us, right to left, at a distance of 150 feet or so. The creature literally crossed the highway in 2 to 3 seconds. Both of us got a very good look at it. There was a pickup truck in the other lane at the time, and this creature crossed directly in front of it. There's no way that they missed seeing it. In fact, when I passed the pickup after the crossing, the man gained speed and didn't look in our direction. We both believe that we witnessed a Bigfoot. I've lived in Illinois all my life, and I've never believed in the sightings, but now I'm somewhat confused by what we saw. I asked a few acquaintances about our sighting, but they didn't want to speculate. One friend suggested that maybe I send the experience to you after searching Google. The creature was massive in body, and the hair was light in color, kind of a dirty blonde hue. I want to remain anonymous, but I thought that it was important to report our sighting to someone. Thank you. Signed, Anonymous. Number 3. Dear TB, I had an encounter once while driving to visit a friend sick in the hospital. I always try to drive at night as much as possible. There's much less traffic, and my plans were get to a motel room in Peoria, grab some sleep, and visit my sick friend first thing in the morning. I was driving through an area with a fairly narrow strip of pretty thick woods on both sides and a large body of water called Rice Lake quite close to the other side of the trees to my right. There was almost no other traffic, and I had slowed down a little in fear of a deer running out in front of me. Well, something did run out in front of me, but it was definitely not a deer. It was obviously a Bigfoot. I knew that as soon as I saw it, but it didn't look like what I expected one to look like if I ever had the chance to see one. It was well over 6 feet tall, maybe even topping 7 feet, and it was covered all over with fairly long hair, maybe 4 to 6 inches. But the most striking thing about it was that its hair was white. Actually, it wasn't snow white, but instead kind of had a cream-colored tint to it. I have never heard of a white Bigfoot before. It wasn't actually running, but its steps were so long that it was covering quite a bit of ground with each one. It never did turn its head to face me completely, just kind of glanced in my direction, as if to make sure that I wasn't too close. But from what I could tell, it had thinner hair on its face, and looked pretty well like a human. Because of its color, I tried to get a look at its eye color, since an albino of any species usually has pinkish eyes. These were definitely dark in color, probably brown. Anyway, that's all the detail I can remember. Thanks. Signed, Luke. Number 4. Hey biker, this happened in Princeton, British Columbia, Canada, on the Sterling Creek logging road around 3:30 in the morning. There were 2 logging trucks about half a kilometer ahead of me. It was very dusty, being late summer, and I was in a pickup truck. I was cresting the hill where I could barely see the logging truck's taillights. By then, I was maybe 300 yards away, give or take. I thought I'd seen something that crossed the road behind the last truck and me. As I got closer, something rolled down on the high side of the bank and into the ditch. I was about 15 to 20 feet from what I thought was a bear cub. This little thing comes out of the ditch all confused looking at the headlights of the pickup truck. It was on all fours at the time. I just stared at it and thought that it was some kind of weird looking bear cub. And here's where it gets strange. The little guy gets up on 2 legs and starts walking a couple of feet, looking from one side of the road to the other side from where he rolled down. I got a very good look at it. The ears were not of any bear cub. Its nose was close to the face, like a human's. You could see the skin through the hair. I shut the truck off and opened the door and stood on the door jamb, looking at it. Something moved from the high side of the road, landed, grabbed the little guy, and jumped off to the bottom side into the dark. It was a massive 2-legged beast that had strength that no bear was capable of. Never mind that it was on 2 legs. I am 47 years old, born and raised in Princeton. I'm a hunter, and I've killed lots of 4-legged animals. I tell everybody now that we are not at the top of the food chain. All I can say that if you think you're going to kill one of them, you're playing with something that's not going to lose. Call me a liar, call me crazy. It doesn't really matter to me. I just wanted to share. Signed, Javier. Number 5. Hey biker, I've actually seen 2 Bigfoot in my life. I'm 57 years old and I saw my first one when I was deer hunting up in northern Michigan, about 18 miles outside of Alpena, in the autumn of 2015. I was able to actually watch him with binoculars at about 150 yards for about 45 minutes. He was in the middle of a power line, going back and forth through the woods. I got a really good look at him for a really long time. When I saw my second Bigfoot, I was actually about 35 feet away from him. It was in September of 2020 in Tyler County, Texas. It's just a little blip on the map. It was actually off the shoulder of the road. It was during one of those full moons, so there was a lot of deer out on the road. I was cautious as to what I was doing. Now I was driving around a curve and I saw this great big thing out on the shoulder. This guy was all white, and I hit my bright lights on him, and he actually rose up and turned around and looked right at me. I was 35 feet away from him when he was looking at me. This was a Bigfoot, without question. He was eating something also. He didn't pay any attention to me. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. I was the only one out there on the road, and there wasn't anywhere for me to pull over because it was a curve. I tried to get a photo of him from inside the truck, but the flash from the camera reflected off the window, and I wasn't able to get an image. But this guy, I would say he wasn't fully standing when he turned around and looked at me, but I would say he goes up to about 7.5, maybe even 8 feet. My guess is also that he weighed probably around 600 pounds. This was a big animal. And he actually rose right up and turned his torso right at me when he looked at me, as I was coming up to me at 35 feet. I ended up getting a perfect view of him. So, there's my 2 Bigfoot stories right there. The first one I saw when I was 14 years old, when I was a deer hunter, and I was able to watch him for 45 minutes. The Bigfoot that I saw when I was young at 14 was actually on the other side of the river. Thunder Bay River was between me and him. Now, I spent an awful amount of time in the woods when I was younger, and I could track just about any animal. I used to stalk deer and stuff. So I was really good at what I did, but I never saw any tracks in the woods that were for a Bigfoot. Now, this guy was going back and forth like he was picking something up out where the power line was and taking it back into the woods. He went back and forth maybe 15 or 20 times, and then all of a sudden he stopped and looked directly at me. And then he walked back into the woods, and I didn't see him again after that. So he must have sensed that I was there or something. The one that I saw in Texas was in September during the full moon. Like I said, he was only 35 feet away from me. As best I could tell, other than his facial features, which had a little bit of black on his face, sort of like a monkey, the rest of his body, from what I could see, was all white. His eyes didn't appear to be orangish or reddish, like I've heard that Bigfoot's eyes look like. They seemed to be kind of greenish in the light. It was definitely a Bigfoot, though. There was no question about that. I guess he must have been eating a deer or something on the shoulder of the road, because he didn't seem to be fazed when I went by him. I looked back in my mirror and he was still there. Just my 2 sightings. Thanks for reading. Signed, Grant. Number 6. Hi, biker. My experience was in western North Carolina, in the Great Smoky Mountains, an area I think you're familiar with. I used to go into the national park at least once a month during the summer. I found this very nice camp spot, about 3/4 of a mile in. It was close to Lake Santitla, and Santitla Creek was a good place to catch trout. I set up my camp and made sure to hang my food up, since there are black bears out in the area. I got everything all set up, and then I grabbed my gear and I hit the creek. I got 3 nice-sized trout and headed back to my camp. I figured I'd hang around in my chair, drink a few beers, and just chill out. It was still mid-afternoon at this time, and I hadn't seen a soul since I entered the park. I get back to my camp, and my food stash is all over the place. Just wrappers and trash lying all over the campsite, but the cans were still there, untouched. At first, I thought that something had managed to get up there and rip open the mesh bag. Maybe a raccoon or something. But then I saw the rope I had tied. It was untied, and the mesh bag wasn't ripped either. It made me scratch my head a bit, but I kind of shrugged it off, thinking it was a good thing that I'd caught some fish. Later that night, I was sitting at my campfire, feeling lazy after dinner when I heard this weird noise. It was a clacking sound, like two stones being hit together. At first, I thought it was a branch snapping, but no, it was definitely a rock-on-rock clacking sound. I'm pretty weirded out at this point, but maybe a little more puzzled than anything. But then the sound moved to the other side of the woods. It was over on my left now. Then a few minutes later, it was back on my right. The same thing, this clacking, clack, clack. Then it was coming from behind me. By this time, I'm really freaked. I stood up and looked around. I was getting a serious case of the heebie-jeebies. I had just piled more wood on the fire to make it brighter, and had another beer to settle my nerves. It stayed quiet after that for quite a while. I started dozing in my chair and decided it was time to turn in. The fire had burned down pretty low, so I didn't douse it with water. I just got into my tent. After a while, I needed to relieve myself. It was almost dawn, and there was a little light coming through the trees. I slipped on my boots, not tying them, and just walked maybe 10 feet into the woods when I saw something move. I just froze. There was something standing in the trees about 20 feet away, and standing upright like a person. But there's no way in hell it was a man. It was too big for one, and it was furry, kind of like a gorilla with its back to me. I never really believed all those stories about a hairy man creature roaming the woods, but here this beast is, right in front of my eyes, exactly like I've always heard it described. I don't know what else it could have been, except for a Bigfoot. I'm really scared while trying to be quiet, but it must have heard me breathing or something, because all of a sudden it turned around and stared straight at me. Its face wasn't hairy at all. It looked like a man, but more primitive, like a caveman. Its eyes are what really freaked me out. They were red, like a demon's eyes. My heart was pounding, and I tried to back up slowly. I took maybe 3 steps back before the thing made any noise, and then it growled, really menacingly, and I just lost it and ran like hell. I needed to get somewhere safe, so I ran back down the trail in the direction of the truck. I had to stop behind a tree to catch my breath and check my shoes. That's when I listened. I don't think it followed me. I couldn't hear anything, but I didn't waste any time running again and onto my truck. I stayed in the truck with the doors locked, but I couldn't go to sleep. When morning came, I felt safer, and I hadn't heard or seen anything further. I made the decision to go back to the campsite and collect all my gear. I was half afraid the tent would be shredded or something, but no, everything was just like I'd left it. I looked around for footprints, thinking if I could find a print and take a photo, maybe I'd have proof, but I never found anything. I'm not sure I'll be camping in that forest again anytime soon. Thanks for letting me share. Signed, Gerald. And there it is. 6 real sightings and encounters with Bigfoot or Sasquatch. What were your thoughts on these? I'd love to hear them down in the comments. And if you've ever had an unexplained encounter with a cryptid, or maybe a brush with the supernatural, send your story to the email in the description, and it just may make it to a future video. So thanks for watching. And until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, stay safe, and I'll be seeing you on down the road a ways. Biker, out.